I'm going to show you how to create these free Christmas animations in After Effects. Fast, fun and beginner friendly. Let's dive in. For the Christmas tree, we're going to start by grabbing the polygon tool and drawing, while holding shift, a polygon roughly this size. And then straight away I'm just going to center it in my composition. I'm going to click on that layer, press Y on my keyboard, and then just make sure that my anchor point is in the middle. It isn't necessary, but it's just a good way to always set up your project. And then I'm going to open up my polystar 1 and our path and change our points to 3. So we have a triangle. And then I'm going to change my fill to a lovely tree color. So let's just go with a normal green. And then let's close our path 1, and then let's open our transform polystar 1 here. Not this transform at the bottom, the one within our path contents. Open this up, and our anchor point, let's just move this. If I just zoom in so we can see, this is our anchor point for our shape. We want to adjust our anchor point so that anchor point sits at the bottom of our triangle. And now when we scale using this same transform polystar 1, it scales from that bottom anchor point. So all I'm going to do is move forwards in my timeline slightly, create a keyframe for the scale, go back to the start, and we want this to be 0. And what we actually want is for it to bounce when it gets to its biggest point. So what we're going to do is actually go slightly beyond our 100. Let's go to 120, and then go forwards a few more frames, and go back down to our original 100. And if I just play that through, you'll see it scales up, bounces and comes back down. And it's all very robotic and ugly, but we're going to fix that with some easing. So let's start with that center keyframe. It's going to go easy ease, and then let's ease in our last keyframe and ease out on that first keyframe. And then I'm just going to highlight that middle keyframe, go to our graph editor and drag out these handles so that it really does ease in and out of that middle keyframe. I'm just going to play that through. That's kind of what we want, but there is a massive gap between these first and second keyframes. So I'm going to highlight our second 2 keyframes and bring it in. Might even bring out that second one. So all now happens within a second. Let's play that through so that's better. It's not too bad. I want it a lot poppier actually. So I'm actually going to drag these right in and see how that looks. That's a bit better. Let's drag that last one in a little bit. Yeah, not too bad. We can see how that looks when it's all finished and comes together at the end. And all we're going to do now is if I just press V on my keyboard, and I can drag this down to roughly here. And then let's just duplicate this layer and move it up. And then we can press S. Let's just scale this down slightly to say 80%. Duplicate it again. Move it up, press S, and let's scale that one down to 50, but then move it up even more, just so that these negative spaces here are reasonably even. Let's just see how that looks. It's not too bad. So what I'm going to do, collapse all of those, and then I'm going to highlight the bottom layer, hold shift, and then click on the top layer so that all 3 layers are highlighted. And then I'm going to hold Control because I'm on Windows, but for you, if you're on a Mac, you can hold Command and Alt. So Control and Alt or Command and Alt. And then I'm going to click and drag to offset our layers just by roughly 2. Let's go for 2 frames. Yeah, that's not looking too bad. I do see a frame here where I can see the start of this triangle when I don't want to see it until it's completely covered by the one beneath. So I think the second one's fine. It's just that third one. So I'm just going to click and offset that top layer just by 1 extra frame. Yep, and I think that's looking okay. So let's go back to our shape layer tool and grab our rectangle. And let's just draw a trunk roughly the length we want. So let's go there, move that left. Actually, we can even center that, can't we? That's another reason why it's good to have centered our shape layers at the start. So any layer we now center, we know is centered to our original shape layers. Let's change the color to a brown. So let's just go with, that looks fine. Let's call that trunk. and drag it to the very bottom so it's hidden beneath our tree. Then all we're going to do for this one is press Y, so we can grab our anchor point, move that to the very bottom so it snaps. If it doesn't snap, make sure you have snapping ticked up here. And all we need to do now is animate our scale. So if we press S, go to the very beginning, make a keyframe. And then if we unconstrain our proportions, so we can just scale in the while, make that 0. Move forwards, let's say 4 frames, and then put that back to 100. And then let's ease in, and let's ease out as well. I'm just going to solo that layer so I can see it by itself. Yeah, I might actually add a little bit of easing out. Yeah, let's just see how that looks all together. So we want that to animate out, and about this point is where we want our first layer to start appearing. I need to unsolo. So let's just scrub through, maybe actually a bit sooner. Just going to drag out our second keyframe on the trunk because it's all happening a bit too quick. So drag our 3 layers along a bit. And all we want is our trunk to reach the bottom of our tree before that bottom tree animates on. So I think that's fine. Yeah, I think I'm happy with how that looks. So now we can just change the color slightly on our tree. So we want it to be slightly lighter at the top, and then slightly darker at the bottom, just so it looks like more sunlight is hitting the top than it is the bottom, like it would happen in real life. And then we can even, if we wanted to, where's my effects panel? That's right down here at the bottom. Can add a drop shadow. Let's drag that onto one of our layers. Let's make it so it points straight down, so 180 degrees. Let's make it quite soft. Maybe our opacity is a bit lower. And then we can copy that and we can paste it onto our 2 other layers. And there we have our tree. For the candy cane, I actually found the best way to create the shape was to start with the ellipse tool. So if we just grab that and draw a circle, holding shift so we make it perfectly round. And this is just the size for the top of our candy cane where it arches over. And then straight away, let's just center that to our composition. Press Y, click on our layer and center our anchor point. And then if we open up our contents so we can see our ellipse 1 path, right click on that, convert to Bezier path. And now we have a path that we can alter. And I'm going to click on that path. And now I can click and highlight that bottom point and press delete. And then let's highlight these 2 bottom points, right click, mask and path shape. And let's change it from a closed path to an open path. And now if I zoom in really close, go to this left side, grab our pen tool and add vertex. And let's just click just above that point there. So now we have 2. And on that original one, we can now start to drag that down. Zoom back out. Drag it all the way down to here. And this is looking weird because it has a fill. So if we turn that off, and then let's just increase our stroke to about there. And there we have the shape of our candy cane. Just going to bring that up, actually just center that back to our composition. And under our stroke, we want to change it from a butt cap to a round cap, just so it has a nice rounded edge. And what we're going to do now is, let's collapse our ellipse 1 and highlight it. And let's just duplicate it. And if I open this up, let's go down to our stroke and change the color to a red, because this will be the color of our 2 stripes, our first layer which was white and our second which will be red. And what we want to do is on dashes, we want to click the plus and add those dashes, and now we can adjust the count until we can start to see them. And they are round because we have our round cap still on. So on our line cap, let's change this back to a butt cap, and now we will get those nice straight lines. And you can adjust your dash count as much as you want until you have the sort of stripes that you're looking for. I think I'm quite happy with it about here. So for me, 53 seems quite nice, so I'm going to leave it there. And then what we can do is on the offset of our dashes, if I go to the beginning of our timeline and make a keyframe, and then go to the end of our timeline. Let's just animate our offset quite high to about there. See how that looks. That's going a bit too fast for me, so I might drop mine down to say 500. Yep, I quite like that, so I'm going to leave that as it is. And next up, and the beauty of creating it like this, rather than having two separate shape layers, one with the stripes and one with the main colour, is that if we now make sure we're not selecting one of our ellipses, I even collapse that, what we can do is add a trim paths, and it will add beneath our two ellipses to affect both at once. And I'm going to go to the very start, and on the end, I'm going to make that 0. Move forwards about a second, make it 100 again. Add some ease in, so ease in on that last one and ease out on the first. Graph editor, and let's just make a nice peak in the middle. Let's play that through. And there you go, we have an animated candy cane. For the present, we're going to grab our rectangle tool and draw the shape of our present. And then I'm going to center it to my composition, press Y and move our anchor point to the center. And then let's change the color to red. And then let's click off that layer and grab our pen tool, and let's draw a line across our present, holding shift to make sure it's perfectly straight. Let's just increase that stroke to about there. This is going to be our ribbon, so let's make that green. And then center that as well. And if we open up that layer, which I'm just going to call ribbon, open that up, go to our contents and our shape 1, and let's duplicate that path. So now we have 2, select that second one, double click up here, and let's rotate round, holding shift so it snaps up into the 0 degree. And then let's just move these down just slightly. It doesn't matter that they're wider than our present, because what we're going to do is grab our track mat and go onto our box, which will turn off, so turn that back on. Let's just call that box. And now our ribbon doesn't exceed the bounding box of our box shape. So let's just collapse those two, and now let's grab the pen tool, and I'm just going to zoom in, just move up a bit or down a bit even. And now what we're going to do is draw a figure of 8. So we're going to go up here, create our first loop, then up here, then back down to the start to create our second loop. And if I just drop that stroke down, we'll see it a bit better, and turn off our fill. We can now adjust our path until we're happy with how it looks. If, like on this bottom point, for example, you want to move one handle and not both at the same time, if while you have it selected, like I do now, you press and hold Alt or Option, you should then be able to move one at a time. So I'm just going to do that and bring these up like so. And I think if I just zoom out, I also think our stroke's just a bit big, so I'm going to drop that down. And there you go. So let's move on to animating. Let's start with the ribbon and the bow. Let's just call that bow. Collapse that, and let's open up our ribbon. And what we're going to do is add a trim paths. So let's add that. That should drop below our shape 1. And I think I'm going to animate the start. Yep, so I'm going to make a keyframe and bring our start to 100%. Move forward about a second or so and drop that to 0 as if it's drawing on. And I'm not going to do any easing just yet. I'm going to copy our trim paths and paste it onto our bow and press U so I can see those keyframes. And then you can see our bow drawing on as well. It is happening all in the wrong order. So for our bow, we want it to start at the bottom. So what we're going to do is open this up so we can see our path again. Click on it. And that means we can now see our individual points. And if we select this bottom one, we then right click, we go to mask and shape path, set first vertex. And now it should draw on from that point we just selected, which it does. However, I wanted it to draw in a sort of figure of 8. So I wanted it to come up and around like it is here, but then I wanted it to continue down this bottom one. So all I need to do is grab this point up here and just switch this around the other way. So now it should draw on, down the bottom and then up. So that's how I want it to be. So I'm happy with that. So now let's just select our layer and press U, same with our ribbon, so we can just see our 2 sets of keyframes. And now we want to play with our easing. So at the very end, we want it to ease in. Just adjust our curve slightly. We want the ribbon itself to draw on a lot faster, so just gonna bring them in. So I might actually adjust these later, but for now, let's leave it there. We can come back and adjust all our ease in a second, but let's animate on our box. So first thing I'm going to do is select my bow and ribbon, parent them to my box, so that now whatever I do with my box also happens through the ribbon and the bow. And let's just do it here for now, just so I can see everything in one go. Press S on the box, make a keyframe for scale, drag that forwards because that's where we want it to finish. And let's make it 0 at the start, so it goes from 0 to 100. And I want it actually to go beyond 100, to say 115, and then move forward slightly more and drop that back down to 100. So it's going to scale up, really ease in here. So let's add ease into this middle keyframe. Really ease. And then bounce back into position. Just like so. Might even bring that in a little bit. Make the whole thing a bit faster. Bring them in. Yeah, that's okay for now. So I'm going to drag these to the very beginning. And scrub through. And I almost want it to get to its biggest point, so here, and for everything to be drawn on almost. So I'm going to drag that out slightly and go on top of this keyframe where it's at 115. Let's just bring on that keyframe, the final keyframe of our bow, so it's all finished before it then scales back down again. I want this to happen a bit quicker. Just going to ease out at the start, and I'm just going to keep playing with my keyframes, the easing and positioning, until I'm happy with how it's all feeling. One adjustment I have decided to do is I want my bow to sort of animate into position as well, not the drawing on but the actual shape of the bow. So I'm going to go and find my shape 1 and path and make a keyframe right at the end when everything has finished. Now I can press U, drag it on top of that keyframe, and let's just move our playhead to here for now, and then let's just bring this up and this up, and let's even just bring the handles in slightly. And then let's just drag that keyframe on top of when our bow starts to draw on, so it's all happening at the same time, and it falls into place like so. So we do need some easing on that as well. Ease in. Let's see how that looks. That does need to ease out, it happens all too fast, so it needs to sort of draw on and then start to move down. Yeah. That is drawing on too fast. And then just back to playing with our keyframes and easing overall, just to try and make this feel a bit nicer. And finally, I'm just going to add a tiny bit of bounce to the very end of our scale, just so when it reaches its final place, it does just go beyond, which means that one needs a bit of ease in there. And there we have our present. If you found this tutorial useful, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.